Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another AB Sports video today. Today I'm talking about the Boston Celtics. This is a good team. They were in the playoffs this year. They lost to the Brooklyn Nets in, I believe, 5 games. Jason Tatum had a couple games where he was very good. But Jaylen Brown getting injured did not help, so they didn't really have a fighting chance in that series, especially with Kyrie Irving being healthy. So yeah, that was the Celtics season. It was disappointing. They were the 7th seed. They were a team that was projected to even potentially go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know if they were necessarily before the season seen as finals contenders, but I feel like Eastern Conference Finals is a good place to shoot. They've been to Eastern Conference Finals before, but this offseason came around, and they no longer have Brad Stevens as a coach, and Danny Ainge is no longer in the front office. So Brad Stevens stepped down as coach and is now a part of that front office, and he made some trades, and they hired Ime Udoka. So I'm going to talk really fast about the trade they made. They traded away Kemba Walker, and they received Moses Brown, Al Horford, and then they also traded away a first-round pick, the 16th overall pick this year. Maybe some more picks, but I got the players right, so that's kind of all I'm really going to be talking about. So the Celtics in this trade they kind of addressed a couple issues. So Kemba Walker is a good player, and he's a good scorer. But this past season, and really even the season before, he is a very bad defender. And teams would pick on him. And it's not even that he's a bad defender, he's just small. He's just too small to play against the bigger guys in the NBA. And so teams would try and switch with him and then take advantage. One series in particular that I remember was the Raptors series. Kyle Lowry would take advantage of him basically every single time down the court because of his size. And so Kemba Walker no longer being a defensive minus is a good thing. And honestly, offensively, this season he was not great. I do understand he was coming off of an injury. I think OKC can potentially get some value from him if he starts playing well this season. But he also has a massive contract too. So there's a lot that kind of went into that trade. And he, at the end of the day, was going to be a negative asset. So they were going to have to trade away a first for sure. But for them to get a return of Horford and then a younger center that I think is promising, and Moses Brown's pretty good. So the Celtics had a couple issues going into this offseason. They looked okay at the point guard just because they were paying Kemba so much that you basically have to play him. They don't have him anymore, so the point guard position is kind of their new hole. You've got Jaylen Brown who can play shooting guard, small forward. You've got Jason Tatum who can play small forward, power forward. So those small forward, shooting guard, power forward, those positions are basically locks, I believe. They shouldn't be too worried about that. And then center is a position that I was concerned about going into this offseason. I love Robert Williams, and I think he's a fantastic player, but he's also injured all the time. And so it doesn't matter how good you are if you're hurt. And so they needed some more depth at center. They got that with Al Horford and Moses Brown. So I think the area of concern for the Celtics this offseason should be the point guard position. Now, we'll see how Brad Stevens chooses to address this in his first ever offseason in the front office. And there are a couple guys I would look at, a couple already on the team, a couple overseas, and a couple free agents. And so I'm going to go through those really fast. Trade partner-wise, it's going to be a little bit harder just because they don't have a ton of assets, I think. I think their team right now is relatively set in stone. To a degree, because not many people are going to want Grant Williams or even Carson Edwards, but they have a couple of draft picks that didn't really pan out quite as well, that I think don't really have a ton of value unless they're just kind of throw-ins. But, all right, who do I think will be the starting Celtics point guard? I'm going to start out with the guys on the team. So first you have Payton Pritchard. He has great poise on the offensive end. He's a good shooter. He's a relatively good passer. He tends to make the right decisions. And the moment's never too big for him. On to some negatives. He lacks size at 6'1". He's not a great defender, and on switches you're kind of screwed because he's not a very switchable player. So I like him as a traditional point guard, as in he's going to get guys the ball, and he's actually a pretty good shooter off the catch and off the dribble if he has space. He's not necessarily explosive, so he's actually kind of what I think the Celtics would need in a point guard when it comes to passing, because they've kind of lacked a true passer on this team for a little while now outside of, well, actually they kind of just have. Kemba Walker's a good enough passer, but he's not necessarily, he's not always looking to pass. He's kind of looking to score. So Payton Pritchard's going to be a pass-first guard. And so I think that he has some potential to play well in this lineup. I just think defensively, he's going to be too much of a negative to really put on the court. And so the next point guard on this team, I actually think is more of a shooting guard, but could be seen as a point guard by some. That's Marcus Smart. He provides more of a defensive intensity than Peyton Pritchard. He also has more size at 6'3", and I think he's like 220. Um, he also provides more of a scoring punch, averaging 13 points a game. He is relatively inefficient on those 13 points a game, but the fact that he has the ability to score is going to be really helpful. And then I personally liked Marcus Smart in a bench role where he's going to get extended minutes still, but he's coming off the bench. But this year that can all be remedied if Evan Fournier potentially comes off the bench. You'd have to kind of throw some lineups around. I don't know if you want Al Horford at power forward and Tatum at small forward or not. But if Fournier can come off the bench to be the lead scorer off the bench, then that's probably fine. Marcus Smart's also not a bad passer. He's averaging 5.7 assists, and he doesn't turn the ball over that much. He only has 2 turnovers a game, which is not bad for a point guard. This season, he did have to play a lot of point guard because Kemba Walker was hurt, and honestly, he wasn't awful. The Celtics went on a really big losing streak without him, but they also weren't great with him. So I kind of want to see the Celtics go for a guy that's going to really increase the upside of this team, because a team with 2 All-Stars and I would say 1 superstar in Jason Tatum should be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, and they were not able to do that this year. So the next guy is probably the most intriguing guy on my list. It is Yam Madar, who played in Israel this past season. He was the 46th overall pick in the 2020 draft by the Boston Celtics, and he was a draft and stash guy. Now, his first couple seasons in the Israeli league were, well, shaky to say the least. He's younger, obviously, so he's playing against grown men, so it's going to take him a little bit. But this past season was incredible. I believe he was averaging about 17 points a game. And if you look at his stats every year, they've improved significantly each year. So that's really something that's promising. And the best part about his game, at least this past season, was 3-point shooting improved vastly. And if he can translate that 40% to the NBA, that would be incredible. He's also incredibly intense defensively, which I really liked. He's never giving his guys space. He's always up into the offensive player. And yeah, I really like him a lot. His touch, especially around the rim, is incredible. His ability to make layups and just generally be crafty. He has a really good feel for the defense and knows where guys are at all times. And he's a good enough passer. Now, I think he's another one of those guys that's going to be looking to score more. But I feel like if you tell him his role, he may be able to adjust a little bit better. Because he's adjusted so well to basically everything else in his career. He's made a lot of changes to his shot, which has gone a long way, and he's just a guy that's going to put in the work, I think, to do whatever this team needs him to do. Now, there are some complications to getting him on the Celtics team. His contract was recently, I guess, denied, they're trying to void it, and it was recently denied, so they would have to buy out his contract for him to come play for the Celtics. But honestly, that's not a bad option. I think that he has potential to be a good point guard in this league. Do I think that the Celtics should start him immediately? No, but I do think he can be a guy that can come off the bench and honestly provide a little bit of scoring and just really just high basketball IQ and a good feel for the game. All right, so up next we're moving on to some free agents. There are a couple of free agent point guards this year. Several were out of the price range. That's Lonzo Ball, Kyle Lowry, Mike Conley. Those guys are all out of the price range for the Celtics unless a larger trade happens. So they're obviously better players than the guys I'm going to mention, but they're also going to be more expensive than the guys I'm going to mention. So the best free agent, in my opinion, at least value-wise, would be Patty Mills. Now, Patty Mills is 32 years old, but you need someone that can help you win now. You have first-round picks in the future, hopefully, to try and figure out this point guard position long-term. But he's not going to be a bad placeholder. If you can get him on a 2 or 3 year deal for 16, maybe 24 million on the 3-year deal. I know that's a lot of money for a guy that's that old, but his game is one that doesn't really decline with age. He's a really smart player, and he's always going to be able to shoot the 3 ball. He's an incredible 3-point shooter, and he worked with Coach Pop, so you know he's going to be unselfish. And just generally, he's a smart player that's really going to shoot the ball. That's really about it, but the ball never sticks with him is another thing. So if Tatum or Jaylen Brown want to be able to take over a possession, That's fine by him. He's not a guy that has to bring the ball up the court every single time as a point guard. He's also pretty good off of the ball, and that's why I really like him as a potential fit with the Celtics. Not only his affordability, but his ability to kind of play point guard but still be off the ball and always make the right decisions. Now, some other guys that I think are going to be a little bit more expensive but still potentially in reach would be Devonte Graham, an incredible three-point shooter for the Charlotte Hornets. I don't love this fit as much just because he's going to be looking to score more than pass, as I mentioned earlier. Celtics have those scorers in Tatum and Brown, but another one never really hurts, especially when you don't have a lot of creation necessarily out of, I guess, I'm still confused on the starting lineup whether Al Horford is going to be power forward or center. I would think center. So if you have Fournier and you've got Marcus Smart, those guys can also be seen as creators. So you may not necessarily need a lineup that's going to have that many creators in it. But he is a good three-point shooter, and he's a decent passer. Another point guard who's played incredibly well in the playoffs, I will add, Cameron Payne. Once again, a guy that's going to look to score. But if you end up starting Peyton Pritchard or Marcus Smart, I do think Cameron Payne can be fantastic off the bench as a scorer. He's looked really good in the playoffs. He's shown just a lot of grit. And yeah, he's another one of those guys that he was out of the league and he's looking to get back in. And so he's clearly improved his game a lot. And so the work ethic's there and he knows what it's like to be out of the league. So he's trying to stay in it. And yeah, so those are some of the point guards I would mention. You could also look at guys like Reggie Jackson, but once again, just too expensive for me. But yeah, I think a team with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Evan Fournier, those guys are all going to be capable scorers, especially Tatum and Brown. And so if you can get a guy that's going to have some, poise and point guard pedigree and get the ball out there and pass, that's going to be great, as well as get a guy that's going to be a positive defender, I think is something that the Celtics should really look for, because they've struggled defending that point guard position in a point guard heavy league in the past. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think, and peace.